Sundowns has won the PSL again. At this point, Patrice Motsepe needs to hire DJ Khaled to come and say the line. You know the line. You know the line. Another one. Another one. Another one. Another one. I have a serious question, though, for the soccer fans and for the business practitioners, business enthusiasts, and business students who are watching this channel. And this is the question. Is the Mamelodi Sundowns Football Club ruining South African soccer? Is Msandawana actually good for South African soccer? Are billionaires ruining the beautiful game? Is Patrice Motsepe actually helping soccer in South Africa or turning it into his personal kingdom? Does South Africa need to have financial fair play? Let's dissect this. If you follow soccer, and most of us do, and I'm not like the biggest soccer fan or anything like that. I follow soccer. So I know that there are men who live and breathe and die soccer. There are some people who buy Kaizer Chiefs. They'll get the blanket, they'll get the socks, they'll get the pillow. That's not me. But we have an understanding of soccer and we're enthusiastic at different levels. So if you follow soccer, you know that Mamelodi Sundowns have continued their dominance in the South African Premier League. As of the 2024-25 season, they are the champions. They've won the league title 8 consecutive times from 2017 through to 2025. In the last 11 years, they've won the title 10 times out of their overall 14 titles. Their latest championship, which they just secured, has extended their record-breaking streak and underscored their dominating presence in South African football. Sundowns are dominating like Great Khali fighting Rey Mysterio. They're dominating like 2008 Lil Wayne or like 2003 50 Cent. Nobody could touch 50 Cent back in 2003. Nobody could touch Wayne in his prime. Wayne was breaking backs in his prime. Fresher than the harvest, stepper to the target. If I had one guess, then I guess I'm just New Orleans. I will never stop like I'm running from the cops. Hopped up in my car and told the chauffeur to the top. Life is such a roller coaster, then it drops. But what should I scream for? This is my theme park. My mind shine even though my thoughts seem dark. Pistol on my side, you don't want to hear that thing talk. Let the king talk, check the price and pay attention. Lil Wayne, that's what they gotta say or mention. I'm like Nevada in the middle of the summer. I'm resting in the lead, I need a pillow and a cover. My foot sleeping on the gas. No brake pads, no such thing as last. What? Nobody could touch Wayne. Weezy F baby. Don't forget the F baby. 2008 Wayne. What you know about that? Nobody could touch that man in his time, in his day. And nobody can touch Sundowns right now. Only DJ Maphorisa has had a run this long and this strong. Let's be honest. He's the only one who can touch Sundowns because he's the only one. Over the last decade, Sundowns have firmly established themselves as the powerhouse of South African soccer, consistently finishing at or near the top of the table. They own that table. That's what they bring to the table. That trophy, everything. By the way, that new trophy is ugly as hell. They need to do something about that. They've been setting new records. They've sustained success. I mean, think about the last 20 years. Between 2005 and 2012, league titles were being shared among the traditional giants, Kaizer Chiefs, Orlando Pirates, emerging powers like SuperSport United, right? Even a few smaller clubs were able to get to that peak position, Wits at some particular point, right? So SuperSport even achieved a hat-trick from 2008-2010. Chiefs won twice, 2004, 2005. Pirates and Chiefs traded championships. The diversity of championships suggested a relatively competitive league in the 2000s. Of course, there was that soccer scandal with the gambling, etc., that led to the elimination of Sundowns players because they were banned by FIFA, etc. That affected, obviously, Sundowns not having a dominating period or participating, I think, in the trophy rotation. But there was competitiveness. However, since the mid-2010s, the balance has tilted dramatically. It's tilted dramatically. Bidvest won. It was an upset. But from 2017, Sundowns has been on an unprecedented run, guys. They've clinched everything. Of course, not necessarily the cups, But the Premier Soccer League is their property now. They own that thing. So when you look at the data and you objectively think about the data, right? It doesn't look like South African soccer is competitive anymore. And that's where I want to bring in some economic analysis and look at it from an economic and business framework. Because, like I said, I'm not a soccer guy in that fashion. I'm not trying to take anybody's job like that. I'm just having and this is why the story is interesting to me, because the sports case study proves some things that are happening in the other sides of the South African economy, where you're seeing oligopoly and monopoly. And that's why I'm interested in having the discussion. So if I'm making some mistakes about like number of titles or things like that, forgive me. I'm not coming from that angle. I'm coming at it from an economic angle, right? So understand that. But I want to bring in some economic analysis, and I want you to consider what is the value of competition, and how does monopoly or domination affect competition? Is it healthy, right? And we're going back now to that core question. Is South African soccer being ruined by Weezy F baby? Motsepe F baby. Don't forget that. He's the real cash money, young money. YMCMB. Motsepe is YMCMB, guys. He by himself is YMCMB, right? So let's talk about the book. Let's talk about the book I want to talk about. And if you haven't joined the book lab, we do massive book dissections, deep dives, look at various books. The catalog is building, but let's just briefly discuss content from this book here. This book here is the Bible, the OG Bible of Capitalism, Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, right? So I recommend you read it if you've not read it. We're going to look at it in detail in the book lab. And there's a conversation about whether or not it's even still a relevant book for economists to read, etc. But this is the Bible. This is where the scriptures are coming from. So we're going to look at the Bible. We go do that. We go look at the Bible. So the economic Bible. So in this book, which I recommend that you read if you've not read it, Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, he speaks about the invisible hand and how the market is optimized when individual actors acting in their own interest, seek value in the market by selling goods, services, etc. So he's making that argument that that's the way. You got to let the market do the market. Let the market do its thing, baby. Hands off the market. That's the laissez-faire economics. So competition, fundamentally, is the heartbeat of capitalism. You know, you got John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believe in him shall not perish, but shall have everlasting life. That's what my mama right there, right? R.I.P. But you know that's one of the big ones. So this dude right here, he gave the big one, and that one is the invisible hand. And what they're saying is competition is the heart of capitalism. The crux of his argument about the invisible hand is that there needs to be competition, right? Beyond and between players in the market, so that the market can create wealth, so that the market can be optimized. So obviously in a soccer league, you have to have competition between the teams. If we're using the economic analysis, if we go into our John 3:16 right here, right? Guys, if you haven't gone to church, go to church. Make sure your soul is right. So let's continue. Generally in commercial transactions, we value competition. Competition is valuable because, one, it leads to improved quality of service for customers and better prices. Because if the service is bad, you can go somewhere else, right? You've got options. So that customer power, it's what drives the whole mix. Because if you're being thrown under the bus by one company, or they're bleeding you dry on pricing, you can take your business elsewhere. You don't have to eat overpriced burgers. You can go to the next shop. You don't have to pay overpriced school fees. You can go to the next shop. The power is in the customer's hands because they can take their business elsewhere. So number two, why we love competition in capitalism, it leads to innovation, right? So what is done is that you have all of these laws that are trying to maximize innovation, productivity by facilitating competition. You don't have perfect competition, but you aim and you strive for perfect competition. And you try to make sure you don't have monopolies. You try to make sure that you don't have abuse of power, abuse of dominance. You try to protect the integrity of the market because you're a capitalist, right? A real capitalist doesn't look at oligarchs and clap. A real capitalist looks at oligarchs and says, wait a minute, ref, VAR, this is what you do when you see them oligarchs all over the place. It's not good for capitalism. It's not healthy for capitalism, right? So let's think about soccer. Let's take it back. So basically, when you find oligarchs and oligopolies, monopolies, regulators come in, they break those things up, and they've been frequently broken up. Google has been taken to courts. Apple has been taken to courts because some of the practices, the companies get too big that you have to say, whoop, that's not healthy for competition anymore. Now, if you think about soccer, it's a product. It's sports entertainment. Is there actually for the entertainment of viewers who love the sport of soccer, men and women who've watched it in their homes growing up, who used to play it on the streets and debate consistently about Ronaldo versus Messi, Maradona versus Pele, Samuel Eto'o versus Zidane, all of these debates that are happening, Saka versus Yamal, who is the best soccer? These things have been happening for a long time and will continue to happen. It's entertainment, and everyone loves to watch their local soccer. Everyone loves to watch it. But when it's no longer competitive, the debates dry out. The fun dries out. Who wants to watch a league where you know who the winner is going to be from game one? An uncompetitive league has consequences. What are those consequences? Number one, if one team is winning all the time, it can lower audience interest. It can lower sponsor interest. Because if no one's watching, because the same team wins all the time, what's the point of promoting your products in that particular field? Obviously, the betting guys are there to promote, but Betway, they have a different incentive. They want all the gamblers they can get. They have a different incentive, and they know how to make people gamble from those sports games. So, in as much as you have Betway and these other companies coming to put money in, it's not generating the same kind of audience interest, right? More people. Also, it changes how the odds would be, even if for companies like Betway, because people like, if there's more competitiveness, if more teams and more randomness, then it's even more profitable even for the betting companies. So even for them, there's a negative consequence of lack of competition, right? If one team wins all the time, one person wins all the time, what's the point of trying to advertise to a place which has had a diminishing audience? In fact, I think more people watch the Nedbank Cup final than actually watch PSL games these days, because it was an interesting final. You know, the Giant was knocked out. These two teams were vying for some glory. You know, it was competitive. There was chance. There was randomness. So people tuned in numbers. You see those crowds in KZN. It was crazy. The other damage is that it hurts player income for the players who don't play in those big 3 or big 4 teams. They're not going to be given as much. They're not going to be making the 800,000 Rand salary per month that the other players in Sundowns and maybe Kaizer Chiefs or whatever are making. But if there's only concentration in one team of most of the talent, look at Sundowns. How Sundowns is basically everywhere now. Like even the under 20, they got like so many players there who are signed to Sundowns already. I mean, they won. Well done to Amachita, and it was an amazing outcome. But if you're thinking about the league, that's the flagship product. Is it healthy for the league, for this one team owned by this one guy who's got infinity money basically to keep funding that money without there being some kind of guardrails put in place? There's so many guardrails put in place in American football, in basketball, in hockey. They've got drafts, they've got various things where they try to keep the space competitive, right? So there's something that was said about oligopoly soccer that I want to bring to your attention and for your consideration by Brian Baloyi. And it's something that went viral a while ago. I don't know if you remember. He said, in his honest opinion, that there will never be anyone that will compete with Sundowns for as long as they are the way they are. He said Sundowns will keep winning the league until something like what happened in England happens. And he said, this is what he was saying. He said, by the end of the first round, whoever is second, third, they buy your players, they cripple you, and you're not going to be able to compete. And they've been doing it consistently. He said, when you talk about PSL football, you always look at the other things, but you don't address real issues. Then he said, for me, the real issue, and I have nothing against Sundowns and their owners, but if we want to have a competitive league, then we have to think about doing something in this way. All other people with money can come, Sean Mkhize, Sandile Zungu, but they will never compete with Sundowns at that level. That's what he said. That's what the man said. And Brian Baloyi is somebody who's played at the top levels of South African soccer. He's been on these teams. He's been in Kaizer Chiefs. He's been in Sundowns. So his comments are not the comments of a pedestrian. Even if you think Jamie doesn't know much about soccer, sharp. What about Brian Baloyi? Is he wrong? Has he not seen this thing clearly? Is that not a Damascus moment for him? I mean, these comments are not comments that you can take lightly. This is someone who's risking his career in broadcast media around sports because he made those remarks and made enemies in making those remarks. So to take it back to the theoretical framework, right? Because I'm not necessarily just arguing based on Brian Bailoi's opinion. Let's take it back to the theoretical framework. When you read this book, me and Mr. Read a book, right? We gotta dissect the books, get the information, extract it and use it, boom, in life, right? So when you read this book, Why Nations Fail, this book right here, I believe should be required reading for high school students because we need a new generation of thinkers who understand that this is a Nobel Award-winning book. I was recommending this book before they won that award. I was already on this book recommending it because it's so excellent. And if you allow other entities to argue against you without understanding the frameworks and having tools where you can give them the answers which have been researched thoroughly and use those answers to your situation, you'll end up in a situation where the oligarchs are telling you what to think about the oligarchy, which is like foxes and wolves telling the sheep what to think about their braai. You can't. You have to find your own tools to be able to think clearly about what's happening. So let's take it back to the theoretical framework. When you read this book right here, Why Nations Fail, The Origins of Power, Prosperity, and Poverty by Darren Asimoglu and James Robinson, they talk about something which is linked to this. They talk about how when you have a few elites who are concentrating all the resources in a few spaces and hands, that actually creates an uncompetitive country. And an uncompetitive country is one that cannot innovate, one that will not be inclusive, and one that will fundamentally fail. Right? They call that an extractive economy. Is the Premier Soccer League right now not an extractive league run by a few elites who are concentrating all the resources in a few spaces and hands? If you look at the structure of the Premier Soccer League now, you have a few elites, and the one dominant elite is the Sundowns team. You have a concentration of players in a few hands. And from what Brian Baloyi was saying, in one team, if you look at the coaching, the management stuff, a lot of the people who are talented and have accomplished in the PSL now work for Sundowns. Some people are on the bench so that they don't have to play for other teams. So finally, you have low competition. You have low innovation. That's already happening. If one team is winning 7 years, 8 years in a row, that's unprecedented. That's the kind of thing that even Chelsea was not able to do. Manchester United, Liverpool, in their peak years, Chelsea got a lot of money in the Ibrahimovic years. They got a lot of money, but they're not able to win every year without fail. Even PSG doesn't do that kind of winning. Trump likes to talk about so much winning. And Motsepe, young money, cash money, is like, I know, because I'm the only one winning. Another one. Trump will say like, you win so much, you get sick of winning. There's only one team and one DJ Maporisa who can say, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about. I know. So, I mean, guys, think about this. Look, there's some Sundowns fans who are watching this one like, no, it's being unfair. We've worked so hard. I'm not saying necessarily that there was no hard work done to secure these victories. Money is not enough. It's not like if you have money, then all of a sudden Discovery works as a company. You still need to do all of the stuff to make that company successful. But it's lack of competition which hurts the consumer because they don't have options. And that's what hurts the industry, right? When you think about South African soccer right now, do you really think that the presence of billionaires money as manifested through the use of that money in Sundowns is hurting the overall integrity and competitiveness of South African soccer? What do you think? The counter argument to this is that, listen, this has enabled South Africa to come back. Penny's back in the 18 area. Because now look at South African soccer. Look at what happened at AFCON. Wow. Look at what's been happening with Amachita. Wow. So much winning. World Cup. South Africa's going and it's going to be there in a big way. Right? I mean, that's the line, Sambango line. So the counter argument is that Motsepe, in concentrating all of these resources, has raised the standard of South African soccer because now you have well-paid players, well-incentivized players, a youth program that works because now people know what the Mount Olympus is that they're trying to reach, their Mount Kilimanjaro, which is playing for Sundowns and having a good long career. And then maybe you can get into coaching positions, etc., then get into media. So having this large, excellent team is good for soccer. That's the counter argument, right, to what I'm saying. And if you look at the amount of AFCON coverage and discussion. We even had the moment where that one European gentleman, was it James Carragher or something like that, was being criticized for him dismissing the quality of African players. And they were saying, look at AFCON, it's a quality competition. And AFCON is a quality competition. And we got to watch it in a big way, because one of the things that Patrice worked on was making sure that it would be able to be watched by more Africans than ever before. And I think more Africans watched the last AFCON, are waiting for the next AFCON. So that's the counter argument to what I've been saying. And you may lean to that argument. I wonder where you stand, because we can talk about it in the comment section. I'm going to be there. Just let me know what you think. But the question that I'm also putting to you is, yes, that may be true. But if the South African national team, Bafana Bafana, just becomes 9 out of 10 of the Sundowns team, is that good for the Premier Soccer League? Is that good for general sports entertainment in South Africa? That's the question I'm trying to ask for. Then, or ask you, then the follow-up to that is, if you think maybe it isn't healthy, then the question is, isn't it time to bring either financial fair play rules to actually introduce competition back by limiting how much money Patrice Motsepe can spend on buying players, coaches, technical staff, etc., or maybe have a draft situation where young players are randomly assigned to teams. But that may be tough for young players as well. They'll resist that, because there's one team with lots of money, but now there are other teams, that bottom 5, maybe that I'm going to be having a tough time. I'm not going to be able to support my family, etc. Maybe Betway needs to be compelled to have a profit-sharing mechanism with the sports teams where they get a certain lump sum. I'm just thinking, I'm spitballing here. Like I said, I'm not a soccer expert, but I think just based on the competition analysis, on the business analysis, when you bump into oligopoly, monopoly, when you bump into this kind of market failure, quote unquote, then the question has to be asked, is this healthy for this industry, this sector, which is such an important sector, such an important part of so many people's lives? I've lost count of how many times conversations start with, what happened with Liverpool? What happened with Arsenal? What happened with Chiefs? What happened with Pirates? What happened with this? What happened with that? Throughout my life, I've lost count. It's the generic Braai conversation. And it's an interesting conversation. I'm always happy to also participate in it with my limited soccer knowledge. But then the question is, in the last 10 years, hasn't a new conversation started? And isn't it time that there is real focus on something that needs to be done about bringing competition back, so that the PSL, the flagship product of South African soccer, can be more competitive, so that there can even be more stars than the ones that are just in. And it will be better for them. Just imagine you got 10 competitive teams, well-funded, because now we've created some barriers and draft systems, or whatever the case may be. That could even be greater for South African soccer than this single accomplishment of this one team. Then maybe the team goes from just qualifying for World Cup to making the World Cup final, because we're assuming that the only way to maintain quality is in this model, where one billionaire basically flushes a lot of money into one team. That team then becomes most of the national team, does well at the continental level, it does well at the World Club Cup level, and then that's it. But what about if the other teams are actually well-resourced, and we give systems where they can also get access to the best talent and limit how much talent the other team can get locally, etc.? What if that is the way to go, past just that level of good in Africa or great in Africa to really great at the world level? Wouldn't that really be the Mount Olympus? I'm just asking. Let's have a conversation. Till the next one.